As a 20 or 30-year-old, buying property in Sydney or Melbourne can feel virtually impossible. You either end up buying somewhere far away from your family and friends and end up hating your life, or you max out your borrowing power, sell your soul to the bank just to settle for a little rundown property just to be a little bit closer to civilization. Either way, you're making massive compromises just to fulfill the so-called Australian dream of home ownership. But what if I told you it didn't have to be this way? What if you could have the best of both worlds? Well, for me, rentvesting is the strategy that allows me to live where I want while I'm young and still get exposure to the roaring Australian property market. So what is rentvesting? Rentvesting is when you buy investment properties in high growth areas while renting somewhere that suits your lifestyle. Over time, the capital gains from those investments might just give you the power to eventually afford property in the areas you really do want to live in. It's a strategy that makes sense when even after maxing out your borrowing capacity, you still can't afford anything you'd actually want to live in. This is very likely in the case of cities like Sydney, where I'm from, where buying a home is hard even for people in the highest tax brackets, let alone those on average salaries. To give you an idea, if both you and your partner earn $100,000 after tax, your combined borrowing power is around $1 million. If the average house in Sydney costs $1.5 million, even with a $300,000 deposit, you are still short. And that's before other fees like stamp duty, which on a $1.5 million house in Sydney is another $66,000. Now, some people might just say, buy an apartment, but I'd be cautious. Apartments come with a lot of fees, such as strata fees, potential special levies that you have no control over, and often grow in value a lot slower than houses, especially in high density areas. In fact, some apartments have no capital growth or even lose value over time, which will prevent you from upgrading or building additional wealth. I'll talk more about that in another video, but just for now, know that I recommend steering clear of apartments. So let's be honest, with rentvesting, you are still choosing the lesser of two evils. Either you rent and get no exposure to the property market, or you rent for a decade or two while building wealth through property in the background. It's a little depressing, I know, but unless you're lucky enough to live with your parents or want to live with them, it's one of the few strategies that can help you get ahead without sacrificing your lifestyle in the present. At the end of the day, we can sit around and complain about the state of the property market all we like, but that's not going to solve anything. What we can do is tailor our strategy to the reality we live in. Now, like any strategy, rentvesting has its pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. You can live where you want, not where you can afford to buy. You're also more mobile, which is great if you need to relocate for work or want to live closer to where your kids go to school. You can also claim tax deductions on your property investment, including interest, maintenance costs, and depreciation, which is not available for owner-occupied homes. Conversely, you might even get positive cash flow if rent exceeds expenses, which may be the case when rent increases over time or interest rates fall, or when you start building up funds in your offset accounts to offset the interest repayments to the bank. And of course, you're building wealth through capital gains, which can be massive when combined with the power of leverage. More on that in a future video. Now, the downsides. Renting equals less stability and control. You might get kicked out of the home if the owner wants to sell, which can obviously be very disruptive to your life. You will also miss out on the federal government first home owner grant and stamp duty concessions offered across states, as these benefits only apply to owner-occupied homes. With being a landlord, you may also need to deal with vacancy periods, which are times when the property isn't rented out. You may also need to deal with bad tenants who don't pay their rent on time or trash your place. And if you sell the property, you'll be liable for capital gains tax if the property has appreciated in value. Although there is a 50% discount if you hold the property for more than a year. So that's rentvesting, a strategy that's not perfect, but for many young Aussies, it might just be the most realistic path towards long-term home ownership. without giving up your lifestyle in the present. In my next video, I'll take you through the maths and the calculations of why property investment can get you insane gains when combined with the power of leverage, which is when you borrow from the bank. If this content resonates with you, please give it a like or drop a comment if you have any questions.